She almost didn't go to Paris. That detail matters more than it seems right now, but it will matter enormously by the end. Iris Calloway booked the flight at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, sitting on the floor of her London flat with a half-eaten bowl of pasta going cold beside her, staring at a conference invitation she had already declined twice. She booked it not because she wanted to go. She booked it because the alternative was staying and staying right then, in that flat, in that silence, in that particular version of her life, felt like something she couldn't afford to do for one more night. She pressed confirm. She did not know she was pressing confirm on everything that came after. Paris does not ask permission to rearrange your life. It simply waits, patient, golden, entirely indifferent to your plans until the moment you lower your guard. Until you are late for something, or lost, or standing in the rain outside a bookshop on the Rue de Rivoli with your coat already soaked through and your patience already spent, reaching for the last available umbrella on the rack outside the door. And so is someone else. Two hands, one umbrella. A Tuesday in October when neither of them was supposed to be there at all. That is where this story begins. Not in a restaurant with candlelight, not with eye contact held across a crowded room, with a completely ordinary, maddening, unremarkable collision, the kind the city engineers 100 times a day and never takes credit for. Paris never takes credit. It just watches. His name is Julien Marceau, 35 years old, architect, born in the 7th arrondissement to a father who restored old buildings and a mother who painted the ones that couldn't be saved. He grew up between two kinds of love for the same city, the love that preserves and the love that mourns, and somewhere between them, he became a man who builds. Not restores, not mourns, builds from the ground up. New things, rising on old ground, as though the city is constantly shedding a skin, and Julien is the person quietly handed the next one. He is precise in the way that architects are precise, which is to say, obsessively, exhaustingly, and at some cost to everything that cannot be measured. His desk is organized the way operating theaters are organized. His calendar has no white space. His shoes, his colleagues have noted, are always clean even on-site visits, which should be impossible and is instead merely improbable, which is its own kind of architectural achievement. He is also, though he has never said this aloud, lonely in a way that clean shoes and a full calendar cannot fix. He had been in this part of the city for a site visit that ran long. The meeting had been difficult, a client who wanted glass where glass would not work, light where light could not go, something beautiful where something merely functional was all the structure would allow. Julien had said what needed to be said with the calm of a man who has learned that truth delivered quietly travels further than truth delivered loudly. The client had not been pleased. The rain had started on his walk back to the metro, without warning and without apology, which was, Julien thought, extremely typical of October rain in Paris. He ducked into the bookshop doorway, reached for the umbrella, and then a hand was already there. Her name is Iris Calloway, 31, music curator. London-based, Paris-reluctant, professionally accomplished in a way that has recently stopped feeling like enough. She curates contemporary classical music for a foundation that funds emerging composers, finding the ones nobody has heard yet, the ones composing in apartments, in church halls and borrowed studios, the ones with something true to say and no platform yet to say it from. She is good at her job, genuinely, quietly good at it, in the way that the best curators are good, not by imposing taste, but by listening hard enough to recognize something real when it arrives. What most people don't know about Iris Calloway, because she has not told them, is that she used to make the music herself. She was a cellist, conservatoire trained, the kind of player her professors described in letters of recommendation with phrases like instinctive musicality and rare emotional intelligence, and one of the most naturally expressive students I have taught in 20 years. She played until she was 26, in small venues and festival stages and recording sessions, and one live radio broadcast she still cannot listen back to because it undoes her completely. Then she stopped. She tells people it was a practical decision. The career was uncertain. The curation role was an opportunity. The timing made sense. She does not tell people about the audition. She had not told anyone about the audition for 5 years, and she was not going to start in Paris. She was going to attend 4 days of panels and networking dinners and keynote speeches, perform the professional version of herself with competence and grace, and fly home on Thursday morning without any of the places inside her having been touched. That was the plan. Then the man let go of the umbrella. They both release it at the same moment. Look at each other. The rain between them performs no symbolic pause. It simply gets heavier, as rain in Paris does, with theatrical consistency. She says in French that carries the careful confidence of someone who learned it properly but has not lived in it. "You take it," he says in English that surprises her. "No, please." She looks at him. He looks at the umbrella. Neither of them reaches for it again. She says, "You speak English?" He says, "Most of the time." Something flickers at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, the shape a smile makes before it decides whether to commit. He notices the almost, files it somewhere. And then, because the rain is entirely serious about itself, and the umbrella is not large enough for two strangers who have only just decided not to be strangers, he holds it over her anyway, without asking, without making it a question. Simply as though it is the obvious next thing, which standing there it is. She does not thank him. She just starts walking. He keeps pace. They make it to the corner, then past the corner. Then 4 more blocks through rain-slicked streets that gleam like hammered silver. Past cafes exhaling warmth and music and the smell of wet wool. Past tourists holding maps the wrong way, and Parisians who have the particular expression of people who find all weather equally irrelevant. At no point does either of them suggest stopping. At no point does either of them acknowledge that they have kept going. He knows a cafe on the Ile Saint-Louis that she doesn't, because she followed him without quite deciding to, and he led her there without quite asking permission, and Paris let them across the bridge as though it had been expecting them. The cafe is called Nothing in Particular. The sign above the door says only cafe in letters that have been fading since approximately 1961 and have achieved, through years of patient degradation, a kind of perfection. Dark wood, low light, a bar where the same 3 men have sat every afternoon since a decade before Julien was born. A radio in the back playing something that sounds less like music and more like a memory of music. The waiter who takes their order does so without looking up from his notepad, which is either rude or soothing, and turns out, in this context, to be both. They order, they sit. Outside, Paris performs itself in the rain with the satisfied air of a city that has been doing this for 8 centuries and intends to continue. She takes off her wet coat. He says nothing about the fact that her shoes are completely destroyed. She notices him not saying it and appreciates it in a way she couldn't easily explain. She asks, "What were you building?" He looks at her. She nods toward the rolled-up blueprints he set against the wall, which she noticed when they walked in, the way you notice things about a person when you're quietly trying to understand them. He tells her about the project, a cultural center on the eastern edge of the city, glass and steel and reclaimed wood from 3 demolished buildings. He wanted the materials to remember something, he says, even if the people inside don't know what. A building designed to feel discovered rather than constructed, temporary in its atmosphere, even as it endures for decades. The kind of place people should feel they stumbled upon, not planned to visit. She is quiet for a moment. She says, "Why? Why temporary?" he thinks. This is something she notices about him, that he thinks before he speaks, not to calculate the right answer, but because the right answer actually matters to him. He says, "Because the best things in your life are the ones you didn't see coming. The meal you didn't plan. The street you took because the other one was blocked. The cafe in the rain." If a building can feel like that, like it arrived the same moment you did, then it's doing something most buildings don't bother to do. She stares at him. He looks at his coffee. She says, "That's the most quietly radical thing I've heard anyone say about architecture." He says, "My clients mostly agree with you, usually in the sense of thinking I'm wrong." She laughs. "The real kind, the kind that doesn't consult you first." He has been in Paris his entire life, and something about the sound of it makes the city feel new. They talk for 2 hours, then two more. The conversation moves the way good conversations do, not in a straight line, but in a spiral, returning to certain things from different angles, each pass revealing a little more. He asks about her work. She tells him about the composers she finds, the ones writing in silence, in obscurity, putting something true on paper for an audience of no one. He listens the way good architects listen to a site, she thinks, learning its character before deciding what to put there. Then she says something that changes the temperature of the conversation. She says, I used to make music. Past tense. Definite. He catches the tense immediately. He says, what happened? She says, practical decisions. The way she says it, evenly, rehearsed, the verbal equivalent of a door that opens only so far, tells him everything about what those two words are standing in front of. He doesn't push. He goes around. He says, do you miss it? A pause long enough to be its own answer. She says, I've gotten very good at not asking myself that. He looks at her. She looks out the window. The rain has slowed to something gentle, almost apologetic, as though it realizes it has kept them here longer than it planned and isn't entirely sorry. He says, I used to paint. She looks back at him. He says, before architecture took everything, I used to fill entire sketchbooks with things that had nothing to do with buildings, just looking, recording, seeing something, and wanting to keep it. He pauses. I told myself I stopped because I didn't have time. She says, he says, but I think I stopped because it made me feel things I didn't have a system for. The honesty of it lands between them like something dropped, not broken, but unmistakably present. She looks at him with an expression that isn't quite recognition and isn't quite surprised. Something in between. The look of a person hearing a sentence that was also already living inside them. She says, yes. Just that. One word. But he understands it completely. He notices the sketchbook falling out of his coat pocket when he reaches for his wallet. He stuffs it back quickly. She says nothing. But she saw it. The edge of it, dark green leather, well worn, thick with use, visible for 3 seconds before it disappeared. She catalogs it the way she catalogs everything about him. Files it in the place she's been quietly building since the umbrella. Outside, the rain has stopped. Neither of them notices for several minutes. He asks carefully, like a man testing whether the ground will hold, if she has plans for the evening. She has a conference dinner, 40 people, name tags and canapes and the professional version of herself, fully assembled and ready for deployment. She looks at her watch, looks at him, makes a calculation that isn't really a calculation at all. She says, nothing I can't miss. He takes her to a place below the Pont de la Tournelle, where the light does something to the water at this hour that he has never been able to adequately explain, not in words, not in drawings, not in the language of a man who has spent his career translating the world into structure. It simply has to be stood in. She stands in it. The Seine below them, silver dark and unhurried. Notre Dame and its scaffolded resurrection on the other bank. The last of the evening light catching the undersides of the clouds in a way that turns the whole sky into something you'd be skeptical of if you saw it in a painting. She is very still. He stands beside her. Doesn't speak. Doesn't explain. Just lets Paris do what it does to people who finally stop moving long enough to let it. After a long time, she says, I haven't been still like this in months. He says, Paris is good at making you stop. She says, you're good at making me stop. She says it looking at the water, not at him, which is how he knows she means it. They eat dinner at a small restaurant he knows near the Place des Vosges. Not famous, not designed, just right. The way certain unremarkable places achieve a kind of quiet excellence simply by caring about the same small number of things for a very long time. They share a carafe of something red. They eat slowly. The conversation has moved into a register neither of them entirely planned for, the kind that happens when two people have, without negotiating it, decided to be honest with each other. She tells him, and she has not told this to many people, that the practical decision she made at 26 was not, in fact, entirely practical. There had been an audition, a major orchestra, the kind of position that would have changed the trajectory of everything. She had prepared for 8 months. She had played better in that audition room than she had ever played anywhere else. She knew it while it was happening. The particular clarity of a performance where every note arrives from somewhere true. She did not get the position. That was not the wound. The wound was what came after. The silence inside her when she picked up the cello the following week and found that something had gone. Not the skill. The skill was intact. Something subtler. The thread that had connected the playing to the feeling. The thing that had made it necessary rather than merely possible. She had sat with it for 3 months, waiting for it to come back. It didn't come back. She had put the cello in its case, taken the curation job, built a life around music she would never make, a life that was, she says, genuinely good, genuinely meaningful. She was not lying about that. But, she says, I think I've been grieving something for 5 years and calling it a practical decision. He says nothing for a moment. Then, what changed? That you're saying this now? She looks at him across the small table in the small restaurant in the middle of Paris, which is a city that has been watching people tell each other their true things for 8 centuries and has developed, as a result, a very good atmosphere for it. She says, you asked me if I missed it. Nobody asked that. They ask if I still play, which is a different question. Yours was the right one. He holds her gaze. The candle between them burns without drama. He says, do you? She says, every single day. He walks her back to her hotel. They take the long way, through streets she doesn't know yet, and he doesn't narrate, just moves through the city the way you move through something you love, knowing without thinking where to turn, which corner gives you the unexpected view, which alley opens onto a courtyard that has no right to be as beautiful as it is. At the door of the hotel, she turns. She says, thank you for the umbrella. He says, you paid for half of it. She says, I paid for none of it. He says, exactly. She almost smiles. He notices the almost again, files it again. She goes inside. He stands on the pavement for longer than is strictly necessary. Then he walks home through Paris, his city, his whole life, his every morning and evening, and finds it, inexplicably, slightly rearranged. She has 2 days left in Paris. He knows this. She told him the previous evening, in passing, without wait, I'm here until Thursday. The way you mention a fact that you haven't yet decided how to feel about. He is feeling it now. They spend the afternoon in the way that people spend time when they are trying not to count it. She asks him to take her somewhere he loves that tourists don't go. He takes her to a passage couvert in the second arrondissement, a covered arcade from the 19th century, glass-roofed, mosaic-floored, half its shops still selling the same things they sold 150 years ago. Stamps, antique prints, walking canes, things that require a particular kind of patience to appreciate. She walks slowly, picks things up, puts them down, asks questions about the architecture, the iron columns, the glass vaulting, and he answers them the way you answer questions from someone whose attention you are glad to have. Precisely, at length, with the small detours that happen when a subject matters to you. At a print seller's stall, she finds a small engraving, a cello. 19th century, the seller says, from an instrument maker's catalog, the kind of document that was printed not for art but for commerce, and has become, by the strange alchemy of time, beautiful. She holds it for a long moment. She buys it. He says nothing, but he watches her tuck it carefully into her bag and understands, without her saying so, that something has shifted. Some small decision made without fanfare. A thing that was put down 5 years ago. Being, not picked up yet, but looked at. He counts this. That evening, she tells him something she has not told anyone. The audition she mentioned, the one she prepared 8 months for, played perfectly, and lost, she discovered 3 weeks later that she had not lost it on merit. A colleague, a person she had trusted, someone with access to the people who made these decisions. There had been a conversation she hadn't known about, a word placed in an ear. Not a lie exactly, something more surgical, a carefully positioned truth, deployed in a particular direction that had changed how her playing was heard before anyone heard it. She found out by accident, the way these things are found out, a forwarded email, a name she recognized, a sequence that assembled itself before she could look away. She did not confront anyone. did not report it. She had looked at the evidence for a long time, and then she had closed the laptop, and she had opened the cello case, and she had played for 2 hours, not well, not with any of the clarity of the audition, just played, grinding and effortful and true. And then she had closed the case and never told a living soul. She had carried it the way you carry something that is too heavy to put down and too private to hand to anyone else. He listens to all of it, does not interrupt, does not immediately offer comfort or outrage or the suggestion of what she should have done. He simply listens with the quality of attention she has come to understand in 48 hours is specific to him, the kind that doesn't wait for you to finish so it can respond, but receives what you say whole. When she is done, he says, "I'm sorry that happened." She says, "You're not going to tell me I should have fought back?" He says, "Would that be useful to you right now?" She says, "No." He says, "Then I'm not going to say it." She exhales something, not quite tears, not quite laughter. Something that doesn't have a name but has been waiting a long time to be exhaled. She says, "I think I stopped playing because if I kept playing, I would have had to be angry. And I didn't know what to do with that much anger." He says, "And now?" She says, "I think I've been sad about it for long enough that the anger has somewhere else to go." He says, "Where does it go?" She says, "Back into the music, if I let it." He looks at her. She says, "I haven't touched the cello in 5 years, Julien." He says, "I know." She says, "You're not going to tell me it's not too late?" He says, "You already know it's not too late. You don't need me to tell you that." She looks at him for a long moment, a look that goes somewhere past gratitude and settles in something more complicated, the feeling of being truly, precisely seen and finding it terrifying and necessary in equal measure. She says, "How are you this good at this?" He says, "I design spaces where people are supposed to feel things. You learn eventually to understand what people need a space for." She says, "And what do I need a space for?" He is quiet for a moment, then, "To remember that what happened to you was not a verdict." The morning she leaves, he is not there. She had not expected him to be. They had said goodbye the previous evening outside her hotel, properly, knowing it was goodbye, not pretending otherwise. He had held her hands for a moment. She had let him. The city around them had continued doing what it always does, which is to say everything and nothing in particular. She packs her bag, checks out, takes a taxi to Charles de Gaulle. In the departure hall, she does something she has not done in 5 years. She opens her phone and finds a recording, a performance she had given at a small festival when she was 24, a year before the audition, before the betrayal, before the silence. She is playing the Elgar cello concerto. She had avoided this recording the way you avoid certain streets in a city where something happened. She puts in her earphones, presses play. She listens to herself play for the first time in 5 years. The woman on the recording is 24 and has no idea what is coming. She plays with a clarity that Iris had forgotten she once possessed, not technical perfection, something warmer than that, the particular sound of a person expressing something they couldn't say any other way. Iris Calloway sits in the departure hall of Charles de Gaulle Airport and does not bother to hide the fact that she is crying. Not from grief, from recognition, from the unexpected, overwhelming experience of meeting yourself again, after a long time, in a place you weren't looking. In her bag, the small engraving of a cello. In her chest, something reopening. 3 weeks later, a letter arrives at her London flat. She almost doesn't open it. No return address. Handwriting she doesn't recognize at first. Then she does recognize it. Precise. Architectural. Each letter standing carefully to attention. Inside is a single page from a sketchbook. It is the drawing of the cultural center, the final version she can tell, the one that has stopped arguing with itself and arrived at something certain. Glass, steel, reclaimed wood, a building designed to feel like it arrived the same moment you did. And at the bottom of the page, in that same precise hand, there is a restaurant on the Rue du Bac, November 19th. 7 p.m. Table is reserved. I will be there whether or not you come, because some things deserve to be committed to regardless of outcome. But I hope you come. I drew that doorway before I knew why. I think now I know why. J. She reads it twice. Then she does something she has not done in 5 years. She goes to the cupboard in her bedroom. She opens the case. She takes out the cello and sits with it for a long time, just looking, the way you look at something you love before you forgot how. Then she tightens the bow, rosens it, sits up straight, places the cello between her knees, and plays. It is not the Elgar. It is not anything in particular. It is 20 minutes of sound, uneven, unpracticed, searching, a person finding their way back into a room they locked themselves out of, learning again which keys fit which doors. Then it is something else. Then it is music. On the 19th of November at 7 o'clock, she walks into a restaurant on the Rue du Bac. He is at the table, standing when she enters, because he is that kind of man. The table has 2 glasses of wine already poured, which is either presumptuous or hopeful, and she decided on the train to Paris that she didn't mind which. She sits down. She says, "I've been playing." He says, "I know." She says, "You can't know that." He says, "I drew it." He slides something across the table, a sketchbook page, a figure at a window, a London window from the outside, autumn light with a cello. The date at the bottom is 2 weeks ago. She stares at it. She says, "You drew this before I wrote back." He says, "Yes." She looks at him, the full, open, unguarded look of a woman who has spent 5 years not believing certain things were possible and is running out of reasons to keep not believing. She says, "What is this? What is happening?" He says, "I think it's the thing I've been designing spaces for without knowing it. The thing that feels found rather than built." She picks up her wine glass. She says, "Tell me about the building." He smiles, opens his mouth, and tells her everything. Paris does not explain itself. That is something you learn if you pay attention. The city has been arranging these collisions for centuries. The wrong street, the right moment. The umbrella no one plans to fight over, and it has never once offered a reason. It simply provides the conditions. It waits for 2 people to be lost enough, or tired enough, or honest enough to let it work. Julien Marceau was a man who had built his entire life around the idea that beauty must be planned, that love must be structured, that the only safe future is the one you can see from where you're standing. He designed buildings that felt like accidents because some part of him had always known that was where the truth lived. He just hadn't yet found his way in. Iris Calloway was a woman who had survived a wound by making herself smaller than it, who had taken the most alive thing in her, the music, the feeling, the version of herself that played the Elgar at 24 and meant every note, and locked it in a room to protect it from further damage. She had called it a practical decision. She had been wrong about what it was. What brought them to the same doorway on the same Tuesday in October was not the rain, though the rain helped. It was not the conference or the site visit or any of the logistics that placed them both on the Rue de Rivoli at the same moment. It was the fact that they were both, without knowing it, ready to be found, ready to find. That is the thing about serendipity that nobody explains clearly enough. It is not magic. It is not the universe conspiring. It is not luck distributed to the deserving. It is attention. Iris had been paying attention for the first time in 5 years, paying attention to what her life actually felt like, instead of what she was telling herself it felt like. And so she followed a stranger across 4 blocks in the rain and sat down in a cafe and answered honest questions honestly and found, at the end of it, a thread that led all the way back to herself. Julien had been paying attention to what his drawings were trying to tell him, had been drawing a doorway and not knowing why, had been filling pages with solitary figures and not yet understanding what he was looking for. And so when a woman put her hand on the same umbrella he did, he held it over her instead and kept walking and let the city take him somewhere that wasn't on his calendar. And in a flat in London, on a stand in the living room where it has lived for the past 4 months, a cello, its case open, its bow rosened, the Elgar on the music stand, pencil markings in the margins, not a musician managing her grief anymore, but a musician working. Going back in, all the way in. Please share, like, and subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for watching.